Hey everyone, my name is Jose and this is my in-depth review of the Xiaomi Poco X3 Pro. So let's get started. First is the unboxing, and unboxing the Poco X3 Pro kind of reminded me of unboxing a OnePlus device because of the strong yellow on the bottom half of the box, as well as with the presentation cards included inside. The phone comes with a SIM tool ejector, a phone case, a sticker pack, a 33-watt charger, and a charging cable. One funny thing I found with the box is that it says the Poco X3 Pro is ready with easy access to the Google apps you use most, which I suspect to be a jab at Huawei phones, which do not have the Google Play Store because of American trade restrictions that prohibits American companies from doing business with Huawei. Now, onto the basic overview of the phone. It has a 6.67-inch 1080p 120Hz IPS display. It has a battery capacity of 5160 milliamp hours. It has a Snapdragon 860. It comes in either 128 or 256 gigabytes of UFS 3.1 storage with 6 or 8 gigabytes of RAM. It has a power button side-mounted capacitive fingerprint reader. It has an IP rating of 53, and for the cameras, there are 4, with a 48 megapixel wide, 8 megapixel ultra-wide, 2 megapixel macro, and 2 megapixel depth sensor, and the selfie shooter is 20 megapixels. I have the Phantom Black color. It's a 2021 release date phone with an original price of about $250. Next is software, and the X3 Pro has MiUI, which is Xiaomi's own take on what Android should look like. And in a way, it's both good but also bad. So let's start with the things I like about it. For the record, I've been wanting to try MiUI because I thought Xiaomi makes pretty interesting products. And oh boy, is this interface interesting. If you swipe to the top left, you get all of your notifications in one area, which I'm okay with. If you want your quick settings, such as turning on the Wi-Fi or changing the brightness, you have to swipe to the top right, and oh wow, this seriously looks like the iOS control center. In fairness, I actually like how the icons look, even if it is very close to what iOS looks like, because this makes the X3 Pro act more premium than it is. And these are good icons and a good layout, so I won't complain. Now, there are a few things that I don't like, with the most frustrating thing being the navigation buttons. By default, it has the menu button first and then the back button. But when I searched for navigation gestures to change this setting, nothing came up. Then I found out that the settings I was looking for are in the additional settings. The problem isn't where these settings were placed, it's that it couldn't be indexed by the settings search. The second problem I have with MiUI are the default icons, because while most of them are okay, some of them just don't make any sense. These include the Camera app, the Downloads app, and the Settings app. Both the Camera and the Downloads app just don't look good because they don't instantly convey to me what they are. I honestly thought the Camera app icon was a weird social media app that took the Google Chrome logo, but no, it's just a camera app. It's something similar with the Downloads app, which somewhat looks like a stock market app, and the Settings app icon just feels weird with that green background. Thankfully, the phone comes pre-installed with another app icon pack, which makes all the app icons better, not just the 3 I mentioned. I highly recommend changing the phone theme to Limitless instead. I seriously could keep talking about the software, so I've decided to make a blog post about it, link in the description, as well as with my camera samples as usual, but that part isn't until later in the video. Something I haven't encountered on the phones I've reviewed so far is bloatware, and I was on a pretty good streak, but this phone completely ruined it. This phone is super bloated. There are shopping apps, games, social apps, productivity apps, entertainment apps. It's all here. So here's what I counted. There's one entertainment app, one productivity, two social, two Poco community apps, three shopping, and six games. In total, there's 15 bloatware apps, with 40% of them being stupid grandma tier games. So if your 5-year-old cousin ever asks you if you have games on your phone, you're screwed. Now onto the display, which is a 6.67 inch 1080p 120Hz IPS display, and it has its own strengths and weaknesses. The display is not that good. Even though it's 120 Hz, it has some problems. The IPS display on the X3 Pro has some ghosting, especially when rapidly scrolling on 60 Hz, that it makes it seem like it's running with the responsiveness of a 30 Hz display. When you're on 120 Hz, you can tell that it's smooth, but it's not fluid because of the ghosting effects that can occur sometimes. If this was an OLED display instead of IPS, the screen would look more visually responsive even though it's 120 Hz. This is somewhat made up for in gaming, which I'll be going over later, but so far, this could be better. Colors on the IPS display look alright, and outdoor usage visibility is pretty average at 450 nits max brightness, so you could run into trouble when in a sunny environment. Next is the color of the phone, and I have the Phantom Black, with the other two colors being Frost Blue and Metal Bronze. I think the black and blue look appropriate for the Poco, except that Metal Bronze, because I don't like how it looks for a device like this. I think a red or yellow variant would have been better than that Metal Bronze. It's also a plastic back, which is fingerprint resistant for the most part, except the middle stripe, which is still plastic, but it's a little bit glossy. The speaker quality on the Poco is actually pretty good, and it's also pretty loud, but not the loudest I've seen so far. Overall, the speaker clarity is good, and it remains somewhat clear on max volume, but 85% volume seems to be the sweet spot for it. Haptics on the phone are average, even though Poco hypes it up on the website. It's okay, it's nothing special. Battery usage and charging are also solid here. It has a 5160 mAh battery with 33 watt wired charging, and this phone gets some pretty good battery life. You can expect a full day's use on 120 Hz, and then extend that by a third if you're on 60 Hz. This phone has some pretty solid battery life for its price. Onto performance. The Poco has a Snapdragon 860, which is essentially a buffed up version of the Snapdragon 855. And overall, I have no problems with this as seen with my gaming tests. COD Mobile on max settings with the frame rate set to 60 FPS was no problem, with only some slight frame drops to 55 FPS. But the same rule goes as before with my OnePlus 8T review. These phones are unable to game at 120Hz because of a compatibility issue with the games and the displays. However, unlike the 8T, the Poco is compatible with COD Mobile to game at 90Hz, so if you want smoother gameplay, you can at least do that at 90Hz. Moving on to Honkai Impact III. The game performed similarly as COD Mobile, with the settings set to max and the FPS set to 60. It's very stable gameplay with very minor frame drops. However, unlike COD Mobile, Honkai Impact is incompatible with the device to run at 90Hz or above. My Geekbench score for single core was about 763, with multi-core being 2796. My Vulkan score was about 2523, and overall, the Poco X3 Pro falls behind the OnePlus 8 by about 10 to 15% for CPU performance and about 30% for GPU performance. Temperatures on the Poco is somewhat lower than what I experienced on the OnePlus 8, though not by a whole lot. I'm just glad that this phone can maintain its temperatures, especially considering that it's a budget performance phone. Next up are the cameras, and oh boy, do I have a lot of good things to talk about the cameras, which completely took me by surprise. To start, it has a 48 megapixel main sensor, an 8 megapixel ultrawide, a 2 megapixel macro, and a 2 megapixel depth sensor, with the selfie shooter being 20 megapixels. Starting with the main camera, which is 48 megapixels, it takes pretty interesting shots because it's a lot more saturated than something like the OnePlus 8, which that phone took more neutral looking photos with its saturation levels. But the Poco tries to be as reasonably saturated as possible, which I can respect because it doesn't overdo it. White balance is a little bit on the warm side, but I'm glad that white balance is good overall. Portraits are assisted by the 2 megapixel depth camera, and portraits look pretty good with good depth estimation, yet I've noticed that the bokeh can fail with my glasses and when I'm more than 5 feet away from the camera. Night photos are reasonable, but they could be better if the main camera had optical image stabilization, which it doesn't, but these photos are nice overall as they are better than what I expected to see. Night mode photos are better than the regular ones, but I suspect exposure control will be a problem in night mode. Video on the main camera is pretty good, but my only complaint is that dynamic range for shadow areas could be better because exposure could mess it up considerably. Night video is okay with it having good noise reduction, so that's a positive. Next, we have the ultrawide camera, which is 8 megapixels and has a field of view of 119 degrees. And while the photos it takes are certainly okay, with vibrant saturation and okay dynamic range, I'm disappointed in this photo where the sky is very vibrant, but the greenery and the house lacks saturation and contrast, which makes the sky stand out way too much on its own. This isn't too much of a problem in other photos, but dynamic range seems to be its biggest weakness with how photo processing is applied. Night photos are noisy and soft and not all that bright, but this can be a little bit improved with night mode, which mostly just makes the photos brighter but not better. And ultra-wide video is still too dark to see anything. Lastly, we have the 2 megapixel macro, and for a macro camera on a budget device, it looks pretty good with good white balance and good sharpness, and I'd say that it's a pretty good macro camera and isn't really that cheap looking. There's also a 20 megapixel selfie shooter, and depth estimation looks okay, but it's also pretty sharp thanks to that high megapixel count. Also, for being $100 more expensive than the TCL 10 SE, this selfie is way better for making TikTok content. Now, I want to talk about the camera app for a few reasons, but it's because of how creative the camera app can be in changing up your camera experiences. In my opinion, the Xiaomi Camera App is a really good camera app because of how intuitive it is. It has a good design that is reminiscent of the iOS camera app. It looks like Xiaomi really wants you to have a fun experience capturing your moments because of the many different filters you can apply across all cameras. Like, I don't know any other phone company that not only has so many filters, but some of these filters are actually fun, and you can even apply most of these filters onto the macro camera. I bet other phone companies don't even let you apply a filter on a macro camera. Maybe 3 or 5 at most, but Xiaomi gives it to you all. You can even record macro video, which I haven't seen in any other smartphone. It's ridiculous. But going back to the filters, these filters and effects are really nice because while they can look basic, I can appreciate how well it can work and that Xiaomi provides these filters so that you can make your own photos more creative by making you think about what kind of mood and message you want your photos to look like. You can even apply so many of these filters on the main camera and combine them with video effects such as background blur, which is just amazing that you're able to combine both a video effect and a filter together. It's just so customizable. Also, there's AI scene detection, and while it can detect certain scenes, it's pretty sloppy and I would prefer the photos with it turned off. 2 more quick things is that you can change the sky in your photos after you're already taken them, and the effect looks very promising. The second thing is that you can erase objects in the background so you can practically make your photos bomb-proof. I seriously love this camera app because it is so unnecessarily customizable, and I like it. Now here's the part of the video where things get a little bit interesting. I'm here to report some investigative journalism about the Xiaomi Poco X3 Pro. So let's get started. This time, I only want to add one more thing about the Poco X3 Pro, and I feel like my analysis of the camera creativity and of MiUI was essentially the investigative journalism portion of this video, so I'll just add on one more thing. So basically, besides the Poco X3 Pro, there's also the Poco F3, which is supposed to be a true flagship killer device. The F3 is really similar to the X3 Pro, but the F3 has an OLED display and a better chip with a Snapdragon 870, but that's about it, and everything else is either the same or worse. So the F3 has a smaller battery at 4520 milliamp hours, and it has one less camera, which it's missing the depth sensor, and it has less scratch resistance at Corning Gorilla Glass 5, which the X3 Pro has 6. What's weird is that the F3 and X3 Pro were announced on the same date. So do we have another situation where it's just like the OnePlus 8 and 8T? No, we actually don't, but it just surprises me that these phones are supposed to be flagship killers, yet there's some weird inconsistencies with some of their specs, such as battery capacity difference. My overall thoughts on the Poco X3 Pro remain mixed, but that's mostly because of MiUI, which I have some serious problems with. But if you just take my advice of switching the app icons and just getting used to how quirky this phone can be, then I'd say you don't really have that much to lose. The whole selling point of this phone is that it has a flagship processor and a high refresh rate display for less than $300. So if that's the only things that you want, along with good battery life and competent camera quality, then this phone makes sense. And yeah, I could mention the OnePlus 8, which could be a running gag at this point, but it's running out of stock really fast, so your luck could vary by the time you see this video. You should go watch that OnePlus 8 video because it's priced the same as the Poco, and it's currently a better deal, but I don't know for how much longer. Overall, I have respect for Xiaomi trying to give you a fun experience by using this phone. MiUI has a pop to it, and that pop can be seen in the settings app, but it can also be seen in the camera app as you can apply so many effects and filters to your photo, and that pop is also carried on to all the app icons that try to stand out, and it's also seen in the control center and so on. Overall, I think Xiaomi did a good job in making the Poco X3 Pro a phone that is supposed to mimic a flagship experience. But I'd be remiss not to say that the phone actually is more like a premium mid-ranger than it is flagship. If you enjoyed this review, then please give me a like, and if you didn't like what you see, well, that kind of sucks, but if you did like what you see, please like, comment, and subscribe because I have a lot of things planned. It's actually really crazy, so please subscribe if you would like to see more content from me. And yeah, don't forget that I have a blog post where I review and give my own opinions of MiUI, link in the description. That's also the same place where you can find photo and video samples taken on the Poco X3 Pro. Anyways, thank you for watching, and I'll see you in my next video where I'm going to be changing up things quite a bit. We'll see how that one goes. So yeah, thank you for watching. I'll see you in the next video. Bye bye.